ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Beer Blather 263, The Art of Leverage. As you can see, I'm sorry for those who don't like me. My throat is doing much better. So I'm ready for a little monologue. Welcome, incidentally, to the Ides of March. And we're not letting anybody with knives anywhere near us today, just in case. And next year, a year from now, Thomas, we're going to celebrate the Ides of Quod at the Roman Forum on the Ides of March. And anybody who wants to take a stab at me, that's going to be their chance. About 23 years ago, Archimedes proposed that with a firm ground to stand on and a sufficiently long lever, one can move the earth. Well, no one but the most obtuse have ever interpreted literally. Literary interpretations of this simple truth of physics have made it from our daily language in finances to geopolitics. And we're getting a masterclass of leverage applied to world affairs. It's only the setup, baby. In politics and foreign relations, the art of leverage is the strategic use of power, resources, relationships, or circumstances to influence outcomes, shape behavior, or achieve the objectives with minimal direct effort or cost. It's about amplifying our impact by identifying and exploiting points of advantage, whether through diplomacy, economic pressure, military posturing, or soft power, while navigating the complexities of human dynamics and global interdependence. Mastery of this art requires a deep understanding of both your own capabilities and your adversaries' vulnerabilities. You know, that thing our friend Adam Lovinger taught us a long time ago about net assessment. Leverage in politics and foreign relations operates through a mix of tangible and intangible tools. There's economic leverage, such as trade, sanctions, or financial aid. You know, kind of like, do I apply sanctions? Do I apply an embargo? Do I use um, tariffs in order to elicit a result? Something that everybody has always done, and all of a sudden people are acting as if they never heard of it. The purpose of these is to create hardship with the aim of forcing negotiations, knowing when sanctions will hurt enough to compel change without uniting the target's population against you or pushing them into another power's arms is where the art lies. Military leverage, as in positioning forces or threatening action to deter aggression or to extract concessions. Often, the presence of US troops alone signals resolve without necessarily firing a shot, as the US did in Georgia in 2005, when an Air Force squadron and a couple of ships off Tbilisi were enough for the Russians to turn tail and run. The goal is to project strength credibly without escalating into unwanted conflict. Underdo it, and you look weak. Overdo it, and you go into war. Diplomatic leverage, as in building coalitions, offering deals, or wielding international institutions to isolate or reward players. A delicate dance when interests among the various allies diverge. Try to get all of the Europeans and the US into a single position. Soft power leverage, using cultural appeal, ideology, or moral authority to shape perceptions and win allies. The Soviet Union's Cold War support for anti colonial movements leveraged Marxist ideology to gain influence in Africa and Asia and South America so effectively it survived the Soviet Union. It is a balancing act, too heavy handed, and it's perceived as propaganda, too subtle, and it's ignored. In the right measure, it can be terribly destabilizing. Information leverage is in full display daily, and it simply means controlling narratives or intelligence to pressure or destabilize opponents, from WikiLeaks to state-sponsored hacks to manipulating press. Timing the release for maximum disruption while maintaining plausible deniability is the trick. Let's take a couple of examples. In the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, the US leveraged the naval blockade, quarantine, and backdoor diplomacy to force the Soviet Union to remove missiles from Cuba. Uh, Under the table, the US removed missiles from Turkey, but nobody's looking. The art was in balancing military pressure with a face-saving exit for Khrushchev, avoiding nuclear war while appearing to win the standoff. The China's Belt and Road Initiative. China lends infrastructure funds to developing nations who will never pay it back, gaining leverage over their economies and politics up to a certain point. The art lies in portraying it as generosity while quietly securing ports and influence, like Djibouti, like the ports at the ends of the Panama Canal, like Sri Lanka's Hambantota port. Leverage isn't just about having power, it's about using it cleverly. It is about asymmetry, exploiting an opponent's weakness without expending your full strength. It's about perception. Sometimes the threat of action is more powerful than the action itself. Credibility here is key. It's about restraint. Overusing leverage, like too many sanctions or too many military threats, can erode goodwill or provoke a backlash. The art of leverage can backfire if misjudged. Push too hard, and you radicalize your target. Misread your leverage, and you overplay your hand. It's a tightrope walk. Effective leverage leaves room for both sides to save face. Right now, leverage is at play everywhere. The US uses tech dominance to counter China's global rise. Russia leverages energy exports to Europe despite sanctions. And smaller nations like Qatar punch way above their weight with mediations and gas wealth. Watch Trump apply leverage to conflict resolution. We've had a couple of samples lately, especially when it comes to Ukraine, Russia, and now uh, Iran and the Houthis. Keep an eye on it. We're about to get the art of leverage 101, if you know where you're looking into. This is Beer Blather. This is Sol Montes Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information from my golden perch in Florida. And right there, right there is Thomas Victor, the only living expert in World War One flamethrowers and a sufferer extraordinaire of the shenanigans of Mexifornia. How are you doing, Thomas?
I'm good. You generally ask, how's life in California? Um, it's really funny because we're talking about Trump's ability to use leverage against other countries and different parts of this country. One of the biggest talk radio stations in the country is here in Los Angeles. It's called KFI AM 640. And one of the regular hosts had a day off, and they had this also ran guy sitting in for him, and he had a little panel of people from TV and radio stations here in Southern California. And these people came out, and in plain English, what they said was that when the rest of America criticizes California, specifically the Californian government, these people automatically circle the wagons around the California government, because protecting the government here in California is what makes them feel more Californian than ever. And specifically, the criticism of the response to the wildfires, that has made them feel more Los Angelino than they have. The criticism of Mayor Bass has made them feel much more protective of the California government. And I was listening to these people saying this stuff, and I realized they've gotten to the point where they're calling on the government to abuse them more and more and more and more, and they're announcing beforehand, no matter what you do, if you get any criticism, we'll accept what you do to us and we'll protect you. So as far as I can tell, there's basically no hope for California, and specifically in the area of Pacific Palisades, those people are all going to rebuild. They're not leaving, and some of the current estimates are that it's going to take them 10 years to rebuild due to the California regulations. Mayor Bass, who these people are protecting, has been caught twice now trying to put one of her cronies in a highly paid position to rebuild the areas that were burned down. And basically, they're at a standstill in Pacific Palisades because the red tape is now being, it's clogging up the system, and the people who lost everything, they stopped criticizing the government because it felt un-Californian. They were worried that they were going to be seen as Trump supporters.
There is a little bit of the Stockholm syndrome.
Exactly.
They criticize the government, and the government are the ones who control the levers that will mean a quickly return to their homes or not at all. So they end up brown-nosing the government in the expectation that that will get them some benefit.
But it doesn't. It doesn't. It's the thing that is amazing about Californian voters is that the government can do anything to them and they will accept it, because to oppose it opens you up to attack that you support Trump. So they've created this situation in which the government can say, Mayor Bass announced that the areas that were burned down in Pacific Palisades must now set aside a certain portion of their area for low income housing. So the city is going to build projects in Pacific Palisades. And
remember that you and I said that these sons of bitches were going to take advantage of the situation to build a Stalinist paradise.
Yeah.
And that's what they're going to do. They're going to do the fucking monoblocks in there.
Yep. And they will block the lovely views, and they will bring in people who will break into homes and rob the residents, and they will bring in druggies and the mentally ill, and the quality of life will go down, and these people will remain there because the greatest threat to their lives is to be accused of supporting Donald Trump. So there's no hope. California will continue. I see no hope within my lifetime of California changing dramatically. I think as other states come to their senses, I think the people who find that appalling will move to California, and the population here will increase due to the leftist migration to California. It's an amazing situation, because the stupidest thing you can be in regard to a government is to be slavishly loyal. Um, you end up like North Korea, where Kim Jong Un sends you into a meat grinder in the Russo-Ukraine war, and you thank him for it.
Well, it is the opportunity that every North Korean has of living a house to their family as they depart this earthly environment. Um, I understand that they're paid an extra, and literally uh, they can leave something for their children, where otherwise all they can leave is parasitosis and hunger.
No, it's an amazing thing. I Before we went on air, I looked up what the press was saying about Trump's announcement that we're hitting the Houthis right now, and it's quite amazing because okay, when Biden sent out the aircraft carrier strike groups and parked them in the neighborhood and ordered them
Yeah,
not to do anything,
yeah, to report on the weather.
yeah, it was magnificent. It was Biden's spine of steel, and Trump announced through his True Social account what he was doing and why, and it's the end of the world. It's savage. It's cruel. It has no reasoning behind it. Trump is simply Bill Maher. I watched a clip from a Bill Maher show episode where he had a woman on, and he was saying, given given how badly Trump is doing, surely you regret voting for him. And she said, no, he's doing every single thing that I elected him to do. I feel better now for
No,
having voted for him in that he's actually doing it. And without comment, Bill Maher simply just turned to the other guest. He had no ability to engage this woman.
he cannot understand, he cannot process. And that is not the only thing. And by the way, it's not just Trump because he's left not itched and the Houthis have to scratch it. Uh, he's conducting military operations from the Arab Emirates, uh, fueling over Saudi territory with British squadrons. It, it is a multinational operation with a lot of people who are up to freaking here that the Houthis have put the economy of Europe and the US upside down.
Mhm.
You cannot tell me that you want to combat inflation in the US, but you want to leave these medieval asshats closing sea routes and making both our supply lines vulnerable and our prices skyrocket like they have been for a year now.
Well, but this goes back to what I was saying about California voters that these people would rather pay higher prices and never eat another egg again. They would rather do that than to see Trump succeed in any way, shape, or form. So, um,
They're in for a surprise. We're 2.5 months into this crisis. In another month, you're going to buy eggs at any price you want.
well, have
Idiots.
you heard of a have you heard of a movie called Poor Things?
Hmm. No.
I believe it came out last year, maybe the year before. I don't know. Poor Things is about. It takes place in the Victorian era, and it's about a mad scientist who recovers the drowned body of a woman who jumped off a bridge and who was pregnant, and so he takes the babies from her fetus. He takes the baby's brain and he puts it in the woman's head, and then he reanimates it using electricity. So
It's alive! It's alive!
and so what you have is you have an adult woman with the mind of an infant, and
A Democrat!
if, for whatever reason, um, she's going to mature on a much more rapid rate. It's not going to take her 10 years
Oh,
to mature. She'll mature in a matter of.
then she's not a Democrat.
Well, the movie was a massive hit critically. I don't know how it did commercially, but it was a massive hit critically because the main character is played by this oddly old looking young actress named Emma Stone. And Emma Stone, as the infant in the adult body, she accidentally discovers masturbation, and then from
Accidentally.
yeah, she's eating, and all of a sudden she's polishing an apple, and she decides to polish the apple on her crotch. And
Holy
so,
capoli.
and then she hooks up with Mark Ruffalo, who, as you know, is the actor who hates Trump to the point of
Yes.
psychosis. So he teaches her how to have sex. So the the majority of the woman is a naked Emma Stone having sex with middle-aged Mark Ruffalo, and then she achieves her perfect womanhood by becoming a prostitute in a low-class bordello. And
With a child's mind.
well, becoming a prostitute helps her become a completely fulfilled woman. And that's the whole movie. Emma Stone spends more time naked than she does clothed. And the movie was praised by critics as being an ultra feminist
All
movie.
right. Yeah.
And
Yeah. An ultra feminist woman. The ideal woman has the mind of a child and gets fucked by the neighborhood.
correct. And
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
by the end of the movie, the mad scientist Emma Stone goes out with Mark Ruffalo to tour the world and have sex and then become a prostitute. So the mad scientist decides he's going to do it again, only this time he does it with the actress Margaret Qualley. Now, Margaret Qualley is another. Okay, I thought Emma Stone looks really weird. Margaret Qualley is known for her physical beauty. She's the daughter of an actress named I can't remember. Her mother is Andy McDowell. Her
Yeah.
mother is actress Andy McDowell, and Margaret Qualley is known for doing small independent movies. She's particularly fearless as an actress, but once again, the movie ends with another beautiful woman with the mind of a baby, and this is another grand feminist statement. And so I watched this thing, and I had to fast forward through a lot of parts because it was endless rationalization for women becoming prostitutes. And you had Emma Stone explaining, there was a lot of exposition about how the reason this was so magnificent was because she was in control of her body. Um, she was
Oh, yeah.
reading she was reading Immanuel Kant, I think, and was upset that he didn't mention women. He kept using the term man. And so in response to Immanuel Kant, she became a prostitute in a low class bordello. And she was having sex with men who look like elephants, men who look like skeletons. And then she ended up marrying a worm who, before they got married, they're walking alongside a lake, and she says, "I was a prostitute. I've had multiple," and then the C word for men's organs. "I've had multiple C words inside me. Does that bother you?" He says, "Oh, no, no, no. I think it's wonderful that
I
it is
don't
your
know.
body. This is a Victorian man's attitude
Do,
saying."
do you have any? Do you have any that someone may have forgotten inside?
Say it again.
Do you have any that someone may have forgotten inside, just in case I need a replacement?
Well, this is the thing that
It's
that
perfectly natural, you see.
she ends up marrying him because she tells him that he's a worm, and that's magnificent, and he's grateful because she's a fully realized woman, unlike all these other women out here who weren't prostitutes. She, having been a prostitute, is now a fully realized woman. She's a towering intellect, and all it took was her becoming a prostitute in a low class bordello. So this
Why
movie,
are we spending so much money in schools?
well, this is the thing, that this was the message of the film, and it was a critic's delight, and I knew it was going to be somewhere along the lines like this, but I didn't think it would be so crude. I didn't think that the message would be so crudely spelled out. Um, Basically, what it was is it was another leftist mega attack on women.
Yep.
If you want to be a fully realized woman, you have to be a whore. And unfortunately for Western women, um,
With a child's brain.
with a child's brain, um, unfortunately, well, see, that was the thing. It's her her innocence as she discovered all this was what made. And it's like, well, okay, if your little kid runs up to you and say, "Look what I discovered," and starts masturbating furiously in front of you, you don't applaud her. You don't go, "Isn't that wonderful?" Isn't you
No,
know?
no. If you're a pederast, you'll probably ask her to do it again.
This is another aspect
You
that
see, the aspect that I cannot escape in what you're telling me is that the people who made this movie are at the very least subsidizing child abuse.
exactly. This appears in a cycle every now and then. Um, Several years ago, there was a cycle of movies that featured heroic pedophiles, and it was all about how we had to understand and accept pedophilia. So the long
People
term,
are born that way. You see.
well, yeah, and okay, after Michael Jackson was it, I can't remember. No, it was before Michael Jackson died. Barbara Streisand famously said that Michael has his needs, meaning it's okay for Michael to do what the accusers claim he did. The former children who claim that he did this, that, and the other to them, and whether or not that was true, to Barbara Streisand it was
It doesn't
true.
matter.
To Barbara Streisand it was true, and it was
Yeah.
all right because Michael has his needs, and this is all part of this leftist plan to demolish all standards, to destroy the nuclear family, and to, strangely enough, encourage women to utterly destroy themselves, in terms of making themselves viable partners for the average man, because the average man isn't a worm, and the average man is not going to say to his prostitute in Amarada, it's wonderful that you were a prostitute. That's not
Yeah.
going to happen. Leftist men might say that. I don't know. But I was just amazed that this movie was as crude, not in terms of oh, I can't take this coarseness, my eyes, but as primitive, I guess I should say, as unsophisticated in its messaging. It had characters actually saying, "You are a better person for having been a prostitute." And she would say, "Yes, I am. I am a better first person for having been a prostitute." And the critics are going, "Oh, it's so lovely. It's such a wonderful, wonderful film."
It's wonderfully risque, isn't it? But you hit on something because this is demoralization 101.
Mhm.
You know, to whitewash immoral and acceptable behavior, to sublimize child molestation, it's part of the same thing that they're doing with language. I was reading something today. It's in French. I'm translating as I read. The disappearance, the progressive disappearance of tenses, subjunctive, uh, uh, past imperfect, past perfect, uh, com- complex forms of future tenses, uh, no, give us a the ability to think only in the present, limited to an instant, incapable of projection through time. The generalization of informal treatment, the uh, disappearance of capitalization and punctuation are ways of killing the subtlety of expression.
Mm-hmm.
Eliminate the word mademoiselle, miss, and it's it's not just the negation of the aesthetic of a word, but it is also the promotion of the idea that there is no difference between a little girl and a grown-up
Mm-hmm.
woman.
Mm-hmm.
Is ironically, that's what you are describing here.
Correct.
Less words and less verb conjugations is a lessened capacity to express emotions and a lesser capacity to think. Now, this goes on for quite a while. It's a nice little thing that I was reading on how this destruction of language, this destruction of norms, it results in the inability to think among those who are targeted by these uh, uh, by its effects. And I'm beginning to see the pattern. I'm beginning to see how it's working, and it's not fun.
Well, if you can't communicate, okay, um, Rotten Tomatoes is a movie review site, and often, more often than not, the comments that review the movie, um, I think it's Steven Soderbergh just came out with a new movie. It's a haunted house movie, but it's for adults, so there's no jump scares, and um, it's a slow burn, uh, uh, and it's the movie appears to have been filmed mostly with um, those. It's a camera that the cameraman can hold and run with it, and it's all fully balanced and gimbaled, so it looks all smooth, and so the movie has a very odd look to it. In the comments, like the one of the comments that got the most upvotes was, "This movie is ass," and
Correct.
it's all lowercase and there's no punctuation. Well, that doesn't tell me anything about the movie. Um,
But it tells you a lot about the writer.
yeah, there's 4 words. That's a 4 word review. Um, and you see this a lot. You see this people make these statements that don't add anything to the conversation, and uh, it's different. Okay, Twitter. I saw some poor Irish movie reviewer talking about how he can't go to Twitter anymore, and of course he's Irish, so we know why he can't go to Twitter anymore is because those dastardly conservatives have been given a place where they can speak. But Twitter, I remember years ago, I thought the Australians were the best English speakers when it came to sarcasm and just laugh out loud commentary. But on Twitter, you see this a lot when you see, like, say, a ghastly photo of. Okay, I remember when Tim Waltz was announced as Kamala's vice president Canada nominee, and somebody commented that he looks like Tom Arnold playing Dick Cheney in a low quality movie. And that was like a perfect description of Tim Waltz. He did. He looked exactly like Tom Arnold playing Dick Cheney. And you see comments like that all the time on Twitter where the horsepower behind the brains that are commenting, generally speaking, when it comes to political commentary, um, there are a heck of a lot of gems on Twitter.
Oh yes.
And a review of a movie. This movie is ass. I mean, that doesn't tell me anything. It's written by an imbecile. And leftists want everybody to be imbeciles so that they can't mount a defense against what leftists are trying to do. And you know,
Yes. Rhetoric and oratory are fundamental to make your point, to convey ideas. The best ideas, when confined between the ears of a thinker, are of no consequence. You have to be able to express them in a way that others may understand and appreciate.
mhm,
When we deprive ourselves of that ability, and it's a process that starts by not teaching cursive in schools.
mhm.
Eh, the bastardization of language, it gets to a point that nobody can express an idea in an intelligible form.
Well, okay. I watch a lot of cop um, body cam videos, and what I've been struck by is the police arrive on scene and they say, "Why did you call us?" And the caller says, "Okay, I woke up this morning and I had my coffee and I went out and I picked up the newspaper, and then my neighbor Jim said hi." And oftentimes a cop will interrupt and say, "Why? Excuse me, why am I here now? Why?" Nobody has the ability to say, "I called you because I found a dead body in the woods." It's impossible for them to get to the point. They 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 don't have the ability to express succinctly, in a very short sentence, why they called the police. They're going to get to it, but it's like, I was driving along here with Jimmy, and I pulled over beside the road because I had to go off and urinate. And it's like, no, if the cop says, "Why did you call?" you say, "I found a dead body by the side of the road." It
Yeah,
it
there's a
doesn't
corpse over there.
it doesn't matter why you got out of your truck. None of that matters. But
No,
you see this all the time. It's this confusion of thought, and um, you
but
see it.
that's the thing.
Mhm,
My father, when I was very young, I'd been 4 years of age. Uh, my father put my first books in my hand, and those were children's adaptations of classics. I think I've shown you once. I have them. I still have them in Virginia.
mhm,
It's a collection that was my grandfather's, and then my father's, and then mine. And it has classics like Ivanhoe, La Chanson de Roland, the Iliad. in adaptations for children. In a if you want a simpler language, so that a 5-year-old can read it, which is exactly what I did. And the encouragement was to read so that I could learn proper language, that I could learn to organize my ideas. And then, as we progressed with these teachings, I had to write every day. I had to write something, uh, an opinion on what I was reading. Uh, and again, the idea was that one would acquire through practice vocabulary, structure, and the ability to relate information in a concise and exact manner. People don't do that. They don't do it in school. They don't do it at home. They have the attention span of hummingbirds at best. And I find that rather discouraging.
Well, let's see. Let me look up something really quick. I'm trying to find the publication date of a book. Yeah, okay. The first adult book I read was the book Papillon in English, and
Papillon, yep,
I was
it
seven
came out
years
in the 70s.
I was 7 years old. It was published in '69, and I read it. And there were a hell of a lot of words I didn't understand, but I understood 90 odd percent of it. And
Yep.
you know, and then
And you figure out novel uses for cigar tubes.
there are so many different translations of Papillon in English that I've read different descriptions. But the second book I read was The Day of the Jackal, and I was 8 or 9 years old when I read that, and I was able to read those books and understand them, and try and give The Day of the Jackal or Papillon to a 7-year-old today,
Oh
and
shit!
they're not going to, well, give it to their parents. They're not going to be able to do it.
Try to
Um,
give them, try to give them the Little Prince.
well, whenever people come into this house for one reason or another, they always comment on the number of books. And to me, the number of books in this house are normal. But just seeing again, okay, like if you watch funny cat videos, cats doing wild things in people's houses, I'm always looking at the houses, and it's like nobody has books,
or or pictures,
or pictures. That's another thing.
or artwork.
Or artwork. A lot of gamers have artwork on the walls, but just in terms of you know these aren't really homes; they're houses. And
No,
here in California, okay, there's a big trend for rich people to show off their houses, and they're ugly as hell. They have no books. They have no artwork on the walls. Everything is made of concrete and glass, marble floors. On the second, generally speaking, if you have a multi-story house, the stairway goes up, and then there's instead of a railing that goes along the giant opening where the chandelier hangs down to the first floor, they
yeah,
have glass sort of half walls with like a brass railing along the top.
yeah.
And the insides of their houses look like
Oh,
hotel.
the new brutalist architecture. You have no idea whether you entered somebody's home, a pharmacy, or a bank.
Yeah, and well, okay, when the Obamas announced their mansion in Martha's Vineyard, that was the funniest thing I'd ever seen because whoever the architect was, I mean, that thing looked like a combination of a Swiss chalet and Vlad Dracula's castle on the outside, and then on the inside, the living room looked like the engine room of a steamer. It had all these support cables,
Mm.
like
Oh, an industrialist,
what?
an industrialist style, like a turn of the century factory.
It well to me it looked exactly. It was even the same color as like the engine room of a turn of the century freighter. Like it had everything except the giant diesel engines. And like in the master bedroom, they had like armchairs right next to the bed, so I guess the guests could watch them sleep or do other things. And
No, they actually sleep on the chairs because they don't tolerate each other's touch.
well, it was the ugliest house I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
the kitchen was polar white. Everything was polar white to the point where
Right.
you were blinded. You had to have dark glasses to be in there.
Because
Um,
it's never used.
that's the thing that this house, not a home. Oh, and they had like a on the second floor. Did you ever see the movie? Uh, 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 what the hell was it? The movie about the guy who was arrested for trying to smuggle drugs in Turkey.
Oh
Midnight
yeah,
Midnight Express.
like the Orient Express and the
Yeah,
something Express. That
yeah,
was
Midnight Express.
the Midnight Express.
There was a scene where he was in a mental hospital at the prison, and at the very bottom of that building there was this pillar, and the inmates would go and they would circle the
Round
pillar.
and round, like
The
the Kaaba.
the Obamas had one of those in their home, and it was like, this is from the Midnight Express. What the hell are you guys thinking? Why did you have
Maybe,
something
maybe,
in your
maybe
house?
every now and then they have Turkish inmates that come to do them a couple of favors and provide for the ambiance.
On the outside, they had a giant um, fireplace that was on the outside, and there were no chairs, there was no concrete, there was nothing. It was right there. The grass went right up to the fireplace, and it was like, why would you do this? Even
To keep the mice warm?
I don't know. I don't know. It was, and the thing about the house that got me, now that I'm living in my own house, the maintenance. Oh my God, the house was nothing but wooden shingles and uh, uh, like decks, outer decks, and everything. This thing, you would have to have people there 24 hours a day, mowing, trimming,
Right.
varnishing, replacing.
Probably do. Mexicans without a visa.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's why they're so in favor of illegal immigration. Um, no, this I I everybody has their own tastes, and I accept that. I believe that Victorian architecture was the zenith, the summit of home design. I don't find anything half as comfortable as a Victorian home.
yeah.
The
One of the
the entrance into a foyer with side doors to the reception room and the living room and to the dining room and the kitchen behind it and the stairs leading up to the the bedroom area completely separated from where you receive people. It, it's perfect.
hmm,
It's perfect. And of course, a characteristic would be books and paintings. Somebody once saw my studio in Weston, and he said something like, "This is what a studio should be. The walls are a reflection of the interests of the man who works here. Why? Is there any other way?
Well, here in California again, the main color for the interiors of the wealthy, you have battleship gray, you have polar white, and you have U.S. Navy dark blue for the interiors of your house. And it's like, I'm sorry, I couldn't even spend the evening at this place. It's
No,
too disgusting. It's like, why is everything battleship gray? The walls are gray, the furniture is gray.
because
Um,
gray is the mind of the person who lives there.
well, I read something about Jennifer Lopez, who's a big leftist, and when Jennifer Lopez tours, if she's going to stay in a hotel, they have to completely redecorate the hotel room, and they have to make everything white, and they have to repaint the walls white. And I saw an explanation by a psychiatrist as for why people have to have everything white. It's so that they can be the only splash of color in this environment. Um, they
Okay.
don't have to compete with anything else in the environment. And that's as good as an explanation as I've heard for why people would have rooms or homes that way, that you know they would be the center of attention because they're the only non-white thing in the whole room.
I'm sorry, but in your case, it sounded perfect. Um, yeah, no, that's part of the deal. I've also seen people with libraries. They tend to be small and very well organized of books that never once were opened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I see that particularly in the houses of physicians.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, People who don't read, but understand that they have to have books in the home to look intellectual, and so they do, and I find that quite miserable indeed. Um,
Yeah, my maternal grandparents were Californians, and they left behind a gigantic library of books that had never even been opened.
mm,
And you know, most of the books seem to be about top. I mean, we gave almost all of them or sold them by the bulk to the used bookstores because they were of topics that you couldn't possibly read. It was like
mm.
in the footsteps of the Padres. A book about California about
That sounds like the religious orders arriving in California,
that's exactly
mission
what it
and all
was.
that jazz. Yeah,
That's exactly what it was. But it seemed
I actually I think I know that book.
well. I mean, it's written by a Catholic
Yeah,
priest, so it's not anything. I mean, it's all about the wonders and the glory of Catholicism and all these magnificent, bright-eyed new
yeah,
Catholics that
right.
converted.
That's why Mexico is the leading economy, and it leads the world in technology and morality, right? Because they
No,
were made
it's
perfect.
what's funny because you know, getting back to leverage, none of these people. I was just thinking about the Obamas. Obama had no leverage anywhere on the planet. Um, the reason he was so popular was because he was so ineffective, uh, and the rest of the world pretty much, had him by the nuts and twisted it around. And he got the blame when things went south, like in Libya. Um, he got the blame for that, even though it was all of Europe and the
It was
Emirates and and they
it was England and France spearheading the move, and Hillary Clinton latching on, and then they bought it.
and okay, remember they came up with that brilliant statement that Obama was he led from the rear.
Yeah,
He,
he led with his rear.
well, it's just what's so amazing now is that the only thing that Trump is doing is he's treating the rest of the world the way they treat us, and they don't like it, and it's too bad.
No,
But this is
let,
how things are going to be from now on.
let's take a look at something. Because 2 weeks ago, I've had, as you will know, 2 weeks of uh, furious isolation. Furious because I don't like to be isolated. I don't like not to be able to work, and it drives me up the walls. But in doing so, I've been reading everything that goes on in any language that I can read. And I noticed a few things. The first one is that 2 weeks ago, just before I got uh, put out of service, we were discussing the fracas at the Oval Office with Zelensky. And I noticed how what I saw and what the newspapers in Europe and the US were describing were two totally different things.
Mhm.
Eh, I saw Zelensky blow it in a rather childish manner. I think that he was too accustomed to doing his speech, and he just went with it, and he didn't realize it was a different place. He was not in front of Macron anymore. But we did say, he's gonna get home, realize he blew it, and come back and sign up whatever deal is put in front of him, and everything's gonna be forgotten, and everything is going to be peachy. And then it's gonna be up to um,
Putin.
Putin, and Putin is not going to sign on to any peace deal because he doesn't want any peace deal. I still remember how Erdogan's chief advisor told me at the very beginning of this that, and this was at a time when Turkey was trying to mediate so that there could be a way for Ukraine to continue grain exports to Africa and all that jazz. And he told me Putin thrives in conflict. He doesn't want peace. He doesn't want this to end. If it was up to him, we would have this situation going on for the next 20 years. He needs it to shore up his image at home, and he thrives in conflict. Then we realize that for 2 years, Europeans have been giving more money to Putin for gas than to Ukraine for arms. Is that interesting?
Well, they also just started easing the sanctions on Russia.
For the same reason.
Exactly.
And of course, Putin said, well, if they want peace, well, I don't know. Here are the chains. Tell them to put the chains on and walk to the near Gulag, where they're going to be slaves for the next 50 years, and then we can sign, or something to that effect, something completely ridiculous. Uh, what we are seeing Trump do here is precisely the art of the leverage. He used leverage with Zelensky to get him on board, with a plan that would involve the development of minerals and rare earths with participation from the US, which will both guarantee Ukraine's security better than NATO. And give the US something for its trouble for a change. And then he turned and went to Putin. Well, now it's your turn. I have a feeling that Putin will not relent and that Trump will increase pressure on Putin until he turns Ukraine into a porcupine and, if need be, send troops in there. And what he's doing is not for the benefit of Putin or Zelensky, but for the benefit of his own supporters in the US, who need to accept that support for Ukraine. And the only way to accept support for Ukraine is to have Putin go after Trump.
Well, on the same show that Bill Maher had this guest who was in full support of Trump, he said that Trump was ending the wars in the world by surrender. And Bill Maher is considered an intellectual among the left. He's considered a smart guy. And
imagine the rest.
Exactly. And he thinks that what's happening between Ukraine and the United States is the United States negotiating Ukraine's surrender. And the way people like Bill Maher think is we give Ukraine weapons, and that's as far as his thinking goes. And it's like, look, the Russians and the Ukrainians have reached a point where they've literally dug a trench system. It's exactly like World War I.
Yep.
Nothing's going to change unless NATO comes in with actual troops and aircraft, and the United States goes in with troops and aircraft, and we bomb the shit out of the Russians in Ukraine and either drive them out or kill them all. That's the only way that the Ukrainians will win this war militarily. And before Trump became president, every leftist analyst was saying this war will end with negotiation. It will not end militarily. And one of the reasons the Ukrainians can't win militarily is because Biden and the Europeans have not given Ukraine the means in which to win.
No, they've been slow walking aid and shortchanging Ukraine for 3 years.
Yeah, I think about it.
Where is the air superiority? Where are the planes? They were promised dozens of aircraft.
Yeah,
they got a handful.
It was going to be two full squadrons of F-16, which is 48 aircraft. So, also, okay, all of Europe gave the Ukrainians this anti-aircraft, this German anti-aircraft. It's called a SPAG, a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun called the Gepard. It's these two twin cannons. I think they're 57 millimeter. Well, the Swiss are the only people who manufacture the ammunition for that. And the Swiss said, we're not giving Ukraine ammunition. The Germans knew that. The Dutch knew that.
Yeah,
everybody knew that. So they made a big deal. Look, we're giving them this magnificent weapon with no ammunition.
The magnificent weapon, as far as the Ukrainians are concerned, is nothing but an oversized paperweight.
Yeah. I mean, and then, okay, we're giving them the Storm Shadow missile. Okay, the Storm Shadow missile has a very short range, and it can't do things like blow up bridges. It's a great short and medium range missile for taking out buildings full of colonels and generals.
Yeah.
Which happens.
Yeah. What the Ukrainians needed at the time was something that could take down the Kerch Bridge.
Right. And they were given nothing. And So what Trump is doing, Trump is saying, okay, you want to play it this way, we'll play it this way. We're just not going to be involved. We're not going to be giving Russia money as we claim we're fighting them, and we're not going to be giving Ukraine anti-aircraft cannons without ammunition. I mean, it's madness. This is madness. And okay, what Trump is trying to do with the Houthis, and my guess is he's going to be successful. He used the term decisive attacks
And
on the Houthis.
and a week ago, he said that there was going to be essentially fire and brimstone falling from the skies.
Exactly. And the Houthis aren't invincible. The Houthis are very primitive people, and we know we've located all their sites for firing their missiles. And what we need to do is okay. Remember, the Israelis went in. The Israelis went in and wiped out
The fuel depots in Hodeida.
exactly. And the Israelis have basically single seat and twin seat aircraft. They don't even have strategic bombers. So the Europeans and American leftists are all about saying the right thing, and then as long as you produce these sounds, these words, then you are on the moral high ground, and now you don't have to actually follow them up with action because you've already said
You're already on top of the hill.
exactly. And with leverage, we can force the Europeans to do what they're doing now, which is to build their own frigging united army.
You know, that's an interesting thing. The Europeans promised, and at least half of them have not done it, reach their 2% commitment of military budget, because it's not like they have to give money to NATO. They have to spend on their own military 2% of their budget and have that available for NATO if needed. Of course, if they don't do the expenditure, they don't have the tanks, they don't have the ships, and NATO is essentially disarmed, but for the US, that has to carry the brunt of operations and expenses. For decades, they have not done that. Now they're discussing about issuing debt so that they can have a budget of 800 billion a year for a new European army.
mhm.
Listen, asshole, you mean that all of this time you could?
Yeah, of course, of course.
I have bad news for them. Number one, completing their 2% would have been half as expensive as the 800 billion they're talking about now. Number two, they're not going to be able to do it.
No, because
It-
they can't get along. They've tried stuff like
precisely.
before, and what always happens is the Spanish say, "Well, we don't like that because it doesn't acknowledge Spanish honor and technology," and then the Germans say, "Okay,
We're not going to fly a plane unless the wings are made in Zaragoza or something to that effect.
well also." They will not work with each other because they can't agree on who gets the lion's share of building each aircraft. Like, we don't want to just build the rudders, we want to build the engines. Well, but you can't build the engines. How dare you say that? I'm stomping out of this room now. You know,
Yeah, no, they're not going to be able to do it. Period. There's no way you can get the Europeans to work together.
no.
Alice is saying over there, you know how Brit reporters are poo-pooing why Trump didn't consult the UK. The UK is participating with American forces, you imbeciles, in the attacks on the Houthis.
What
It's not that they weren't consulted; they're a part of the operation, for crying out loud.
what the press is angry about is that it wasn't announced beforehand, and the Houthis were not given the opportunity to move all their missile launchers. And
Right,
because remember,
underground or whatever. Yeah,
Biden said we're going to be attacking in 48 hours.
in this place and that place.
Yeah,
Same as Obama. Remember, Obama used to telegraph every fucking move 2 weeks in advance.
yeah. And the press thinks that they are the most important institution on the face of the earth. And they think if they're not getting information, it means that it's not happening. Well, Trump and the British secretly, without telling the press, worked out what they were going to do, and they're doing it.
Yep, and
Remember,
it's
Trump carried out a double digit number of hostage rescues during his first term. To this day, we don't even know who was rescued, or all we know is that he used the Delta Force. And
yes, and I know it was over 70.
exactly. So it's encroaching a triple digit number of hostage rescues. And yeah, I saw some complaint. It was some complaint about Trump killing the head of I think it was Al Shabaab in Somalia, and the complaint was that there wasn't enough notice given before the attack, and that this was in a large publication that we made Al Shabaab look bad.
Oh, imagine that.
And it's just like, I'm sorry, you might feel guilty that Trump ordered the dropping of bombs on black people, but I don't feel guilty. I give that guy the courtesy of treating him the way I treat any other enemy of the United States. Um, you know, I don't feel bad. Again, this is what the press refuses to accept. The Houthis, Al Shabaab, Hamas, Hezbollah, they all know the rules of the game. And they know that if they pick a fight with certain countries, that they're going to get plastered. So
Yep.
when the plastering comes,
Oh,
they,
and they're gonna get plastered all across the front. It,
hello, Saul is frozen. He is frozen solid.
there we are.
Okay,
Are you
well,
back? Okay, I was saying, the first thing I can speak, and as soon as I got up in the morning, I got a call to go to a a panel in Kurdistan TV. Let me show you what I did, because this is our next subject in this, and this is using leverage with a lever about 4 miles long.
Mr. Saul Montes, thank you so much for joining us from Florida. Thank you so much for being with Kurdistan 24. The Peshmerga's role within the coalition in order to defeat Daesh. How do you see their role and how the coalition is looking to the Peshmerga role?
Well, how I see the role is not as important as how President Trump sees the role. And since he has, in notifying the world of the demise of Abdallah Mahdi Musli al Rifa, President Trump expressly thanked the region of Kurdistan and the Peshmerga for their role in nabbing this target. I think that tells us all we need to know about the importance of the role played by the Peshmerga in getting ISIS number 2.
These coordinations, how effective they are going to be specifically between the Peshmerga and international coalition in order to reduce the terrorism threats in the region and in Iraq. And as now we're seeing the sleepy cells of ISIS are emerging and they are still a threat.
Well, they never stopped of us would have loved to in the past 4 years. We see that now we are back. We're back on the job, and it's always been vital, the cooperation that the region of Kurdistan in Iraq has offered the coalition, and I don't have to rehash how important it was in the military defeat of ISIS, uh, but it is just as important to clear the remnants of ISIS, uh, particularly in the areas between Baghdad and Erbil, and in Al Anbar, where the Kurdistan.
Well, so you mentioned it that the coalition role in why do you see that? What was the reason behind it? And how is it that you are back to the job?
But for the past to find a foothold in many an area, and why the previous administration was so aloof about it, I don't know. I have no rational reason for that. But it is obvious that uh, the break is.
So the regional situation, specifically what's happening in Syria and the threats, the border. Very well. Mr. Salmon, strategy. Thank you so much for joining K24 on your analysis. Appreciate it, sir.
Hello there.
Hey,
We're having a little internet problem somewhere out there, but I hope you could see enough of it.
hmm
But of course, this has to do that today, the day that we start hitting the Houthis back, is also the day we started hitting ISIS back.
hmm
And on orders from President Trump, CENTCOM carried out an attack in coordination with Peshmerga and Iraqi forces in Al Anbar province, and they
hmm
took Abu Khalifa, or ISIS number two, the guy essentially in charge of ISIS operations worldwide, who became one with the cosmos.
hmm
This is, I used it actually in our meme today. Um, Let me see. Uh, there you go. Your finger is pointing at the very car where that moron exhaled his last breath. Okay,
Yeah.
and the thing is, all of a sudden, after 4 years of playing footsie with Iran and allowing the worst of the terrorists in this world to essentially do their bidding. Uh, Now we're beginning to act, and we have gone uh, to leverage our military superiority uh, in ways that we haven't in 4 years.
Mhm.
What do you think the result is going to be for the fellows at ISIS, the Houthis, and the one I'm waiting every day for, Hamas holes?
Well, Hamas is trying to make a separate deal with the U.S. in order to separate Israel from the U.S. They
Yeah.
want, and it's not going to work, of course. There's all sorts of rumblings going on about just how many troops Israel is going to send into Gaza in the upcoming days, and it's you're hearing numbers anywhere from 50,000 to 400,000, and I don't think it's anywhere going to be anywhere near 400,000 because I don't think they're going to be needed. But the okay, Victor Davis Hanson said that Trump is going to have to use military force on a grand scale at least once in his presidency, and I don't think we're going to do it to the Russians because I think the Russians are very vulnerable economically, and I don't think we're going to do it to the Chinese. The Chinese just released footage or photos of their what they call their landing barges for Taiwan, and they're the most glorious, biggest, fattest targets you've ever seen, and they have these ladders on the end of them. They're going to be full of troops, and then they're going to get close to the shores of Taiwan. The ladder is going to come down, and these people are going to climb across the ladder in single file. So even if they make it across the stretch of water between mainland China and Taiwan, which they won't, they're going to be targeted by the Taiwanese and the Japanese pouring fire down onto these barges, and it's and the press is just going wild with the threat this poses.
They might as well use their fishing boats.
Well, this is the thing. That's what the Chinese do. They count fishing boats as being part of their navy, and so it's not going to be the Chinese. I think it has to be Iran, and Iran is causing far more trouble globally than China and Russia in terms of instability wreaked upon
Oh
the
yeah. Oh yeah.
and you can bet that the Trump administration is in contact with the people who will take over after the mullahs are overthrown. And as you and I have said, the only thing Trump needs to do is destroy the military capabilities of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And my guess is that the regular Iranian armed forces will take over from there. And
or melt away.
say it again.
Or melt away.
Or melt away. Yeah. Iranians aren't like other people in that. Okay, the state of Iran is actually pretty horrible right now. They have, drug addiction is rampant. Half their population is what, 16 and under or something like that. It's some.
How many dozens of thousands of victims of the earthquake 4 years ago are still living in tents?
Exactly. And so it's going to take a hell of a lot. The good thing about countries like Iran and Ukraine, I was going to say Syria, but it's impossible to know what's actually happening in Syria right now, just because the press is reporting as factual what they're being told by Assad's people, and it's just impossible to know. I do know from studying the Syrian civil war that a lot of the Sunni terrorist groups will do whatever Iran tells them to do for money and power. And so
Yeah.
The current interim government has said that they're not responsible for the massacre of Alawites. We don't know how many Alawites have been massacred. We don't know if it's Alawites massacring Alawites the way Assad did. We just don't know what's going on because the press is so absolutely unreliable. But countries like Iran and Ukraine, if they're hostile, okay, Ukraine doesn't have a hostile government, but in the case of Ukraine, if a ceasefire is declared, and in the case of Iran, if the hostile government is overthrown, tons of private sector companies will want to go in there and help rebuild, and
Yep.
so those countries aren't going to lie fallow for decades.
No. The Italians already have contracts with the Ukrainian government for the reconstruction period. There are companies that have already been negotiating their role in the rebuilding of roads, schools, residences. Uh, it's going to be one of the fastest rebuilds we have seen.
Yeah, and the Ukrainians will okay. I for since the Russian invasion began, I watched all these channels on YouTube that gave news about what was happening, and gradually these channels became analysis channels, even though the people running the channels weren't qualified to really make any real analysis. And these are all Europeans, and now they're all violently anti-Trump, and they're saying that Trump is surrendering Ukraine to the Russians. And you can't argue with people like that because they were predisposed to dislike Trump given what their press was telling them, and so what they're seeing is it's something that they had already thought was going to happen, and they think it's happening now. Trump has no idea what he's doing, and it's like, yes, but the Europeans do. The Estonians know what they're doing.
Yeah. The Macron people have a perfectly good idea of what's going on. Not
exactly. Exactly.
The Europeans, by the way, are getting involved in their own shit in ways that are going to make the next 4 years very interesting. In Germany, as we anticipated, the CDU won the election with 30% of the vote and just a couple of points ahead of Alternative for Deutschland. And they cannot form a government unless they enter into an alliance with Alternative for Deutschland, or, oh, no, wait a second, they're never going to do that. So just as we anticipated, the CDU is forming a government now together with the Socialist and the Greens.
Yeah. So nothing is going to
change. In order to get the Greens to accept the proposal, they had to bend over, grab their ankles, and open wide.
Yeah.
So they had to give the Greens more than they ever thought they would ever get.
Right. So the Germans could actually end up in a worse position than they had before.
They are from an energy point of view, they have entered the suicidal stage. They are destroying their capacity to produce energy, and as a consequence of that, they are destroying their industry.
Mm-hmm.
German industrial prowess is on its way to the toilet right now. Uh, their European Union is interfered in Romanian elections. First, canceling an election because the candidate who won the largest number of votes wasn't their favorite. Now again, the guy was leading in the polls in the new election, so they interfered again and prescribed him. So uh, he cannot go, be a candidate anymore. So now we have another chap who's coming in his stead, and lo and behold, it looks like he's going to be leading the polls now. And the European Union is in desperate efforts to do in Europe what the Democrats did in the US.
Hmm.
They can't stop it. They cannot stop it. There was in the October Revolution, which of course took place in November, but nothing is what it seems in Europe. Um, the most violent event was the uh, uh, assault on the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg,
Hmm.
the most deadly one. And Lenin blamed the defenders when he was accused of using unnecessary violence. He says it wasn't our fault; it was theirs. They had an untenable position; they couldn't defend the place. They should have resigned their position and surrendered to avoid bloodshed. They didn't, so we had to go in force with a violence that was directly proportional to the violence of the defense, and we ended up with a bloodbath. Eh, that, which may seem twisted, is actually quite correct in situations like this. If you have an untenable position, uh, maybe it's time to live to fight another battle. If you defend your position at any cost, like the Alamo, you know, that may be okay for others, but you guys ain't fighting another battle. You're not going to see the end of this. Europe is in a Winter Palace or Alamo mentality, the left.
Hmm.
They're losing control. They're losing control of election processes in Romania, in France, in Spain, pretty soon coming to England. And they're not liking it, and they're resorting to the most basest instincts and to the most crude interference to keep non-leftists out of the government. To keep and the funny thing is, if you ask me, there isn't a single group in Europe that isn't collectivist to a degree.
Hmm.
Even what they call the uber right are socialist to me.
Well, I saw something about the Croatian Ustase today, and the first thing out of the narrator's mouth was that it was a far right organization, and it was the Ustase were propped up by the Nazis, by the Italian fascists,
And the Catholic Church.
by the Catholic Church because they were Catholics, and
Yes,
they were collectivists. They were not
of
far right
course.
any more than Hitler was far right. And this is the problem with the Europeans, is that their politics are so screwed up because their politics are based on falsehoods. They claim that Nazis are far right. Nazis are collectivist socialists, and
Yep.
until they accept that, you know, they. I mean, there, as you said, there are no non-collectivists in Europe. Um,
Individuals, yes. I mean, there's plenty of them,
Not parties.
but not parties. I mean, even There are parties where you have uh, uh, a more subtle collectivist stance, eh, where there are more people who aren't collectivists in the party. eh, but there isn't really a party that is fighting collectivism. They all stop. It reminds me of Cuba when I went there, and all of these lobotomized imbeciles were telling me how things were bad in the island. That things were bad in '92. Imagine that. It was fucking paradise on earth compared to today. I think they're into the third night in the dark now. The entire fucking country, the electrical system collapsed. All of those Soviet-made thermal uh, 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 electricity uh, stations have all collapsed almost at the same time. Um, but they were telling me how we need change, but we need to preserve the successes of the revolution.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what the fuck is that? Education. You're gonna be kidding me.
Yeah.
Healthcare.
Yeah.
Healthcare. You have no hospitals, you moron. You have no medicines. You have no pharmacies. People are dying of common curable diseases in this stupid island. But in their collective imagination, they had swallowed the regime's propaganda and they believed they had an educational system second to none and a health system that was the jewel of mankind. And they didn't realize that it wasn't so. So they wanted to preserve those wonderful successes of the revolution. The same thing happens in Europe. They are convinced that the social democrats brought them everything that is good on this planet, when the opposite is true. We work 8 hours a day because of the social democrats. No, you work 8 hours a day because that is what our means of production today require.
Well, you just reminded me about another aspect of that movie, Poor Things, that I just remembered when the woman child was being taken all around the planet on a sex tour. She ended up on an ocean liner. Mark Ruffalo took her on an ocean liner, and then they stopped by this island, and the island had this huge resort on the top of a mountain, and then below there were what looked like the Egyptian slaves that built the pyramids. Like they were just sort of lying around. And so the woman child at some point went over to the balcony and looked down, and one of the guests at the resort came up to her and said, "Oh, there's a lot more babies dying. It must be the heat." So she burst into tears and said, "We have to help them." And she ran down a flight of stairs because she was going to go help them. And he grabbed her and stopped her, and he said that if they were up here and we were down there, they would do the same thing we're doing. So she realized that rich men were evil. And at the end of the movie, she had become a rich woman, and the movie ends with her in her sumptuous garden lying on a chaise lounge, and she's imported all the prostitutes she worked with because they were all real people, and they're drinking martinis, and she's reading her James Joyce or whatever. And now she's moral. She's rich. She's an indolent rich person, but she's moral because she's a woman. She hasn't used her wealth to do anything, but she did cry for the dying poor, and that absolved her of any responsibility to actually do anything. So the movie it had everything we talked about before, but it was also violently opposed to personal wealth in the hands of males. And that,
or anybody else for that matter.
well, okay, this woman was the main character, and she was sort of running the show by being a prostitute. So she was allowed to be rich. She was allowed to be an indolent rich person because she was so moral. And that's I remember I had an argument with a woman, a self-proclaimed socialist, when Britain's most famous socialist died, and he was a billionaire, and his mansion took up an entire city block in London. And I was just saying to her, how could he call himself a socialist when he was a billionaire? And she said, well, just because he's a socialist doesn't mean he can't have nice things. I said, yeah, but don't you think he could survive on, say, 100 million pounds rather than a billion, and he could donate all the rest to help? And she instantly blew up and said, all right, fine. He should be poor. He should have nothing. I had just said he could get by with 100 million pounds. I didn't say he should be poor and have nothing, but that was her position, was that if he, she had to twist my words. She had to build a snowman.
Fallacy of the excluded middle, my friend. It's
exactly
common. It has to be a whore or a nun.
Exactly. And it was just really funny because remember the French billionaire socialist who got accused of raping the maid in New York City?
Yeah.
How many billions?
How about Jaume Rodes, the billionaire from Catalonia who proclaims himself a Trotskyite and who says that he's making money for the revolution?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, all they have to do is say the right thing, and they get praised and they get help put up on the pedestal, and they don't have to actually live the way they preach. Nobody expects that from them because all you have to do is just say. I saw another movie. It was called Strange Darling. And Strange Darling is about a woman fleeing from a man who's trying to shoot her. And it turns out it's a serial killer movie, but the big fat twist is that she's the serial killer and he's trying to kill her because she killed his family members. But at the end of the movie, when she's asked by a cop why she killed all those people, she says they weren't, I didn't see them as humans, they were demons. And then suddenly she sees the cop as a demon. And so none of it was her fault. She was a victim because she saw demons. And it was the dumbest movie I've ever seen. It was so obvious from the start that
the problem is when all the judges in New York see criminals as victims,
which they do, and
that thing in the movie is part of the normalization of the idea that the criminal is nothing but a victim of the system.
Of course,
not really their fault. I mean, yes, I killed them. I stuck the knife and twisted it around until they died. Oh, poor thing. Yeah. Oh, what an awful life to take you to this point. You go home, my child, and buy another knife.
Yeah, sometime in the 1980s, the band Oingo Boingo wrote a song called Only a Lad. And it was about a career criminal. And every time he was brought before the judges would cry and say, he's only a lad. He didn't mean it. He didn't, and he would be released to commit more crimes. And this was in the 1980s. They were singing about this.
Yes.
They had no idea how bad things were going to get in California.
Oh, come on. And in the 1980s, they had that movement to free Mumia,
Yes, yes,
that piece of shit in Philadelphia.
yeah. Who who ambushed a cop with his brother and then became a cause celeb. He they
Yeah,
allowed him they allowed him to broadcast from death row. I mean, holy God! And eventually his death sentence was commuted.
he was a cop killer. They should have. I can't say it because they're going to strike us again in YouTube and all that jazz. But give me a freaking break, man. The guy. How about that bitch? Uh, what's her name? She's in Cuba still.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. I know who you're talking about from
uh, uh,
the 1960s.
yeah, her nephew was a famous rapper.
Yeah,
Um,
Angela
also,
Angela something.
something or other. And that stupid cow. There's still people defending that cop killer.
Of course, of course.
And both the left and the right have these kind of by now uh, romanticization of criminality. All of the people who defend Tommy Robinson, uh, Stephen Yaxley Lennon. Uh, I mean, come on, the guy is a career fucking criminal.
Well, look at the movie Bonnie and Clyde with Warren Beatty and uh, Dunaway, Faye Dunaway.
Mm-hmm.
Like the real Bonnie and Clyde were like garbage, and
Bloodthirsty garbage.
yep. And in the movie, they made them into very sympathetic characters who didn't kill people unless they absolutely had to. And it's like, but what do you mean you had to? You were stealing the bank's money and they tried to stop you. You didn't have to kill them. You had to not steal the bank's money. I don't know. It was an amazing film.
I remember I remember thinking that when I first saw it. Oh God, that movie was from the 70s or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It was an old one, but I remember since this is the apology of crime.
Kevin Costner made a movie in 23 or 24, I believe, about the Texas Rangers who killed Bonnie and Clyde. And
Mhm.
even he had the Texas Ranger go out in the middle of the road and say, hands up, and give them a chance to surrender. That's not what happened. What happened
Oh,
was,
they started shooting when the car showed up.
yeah, they had somebody who Bonnie and Clyde knew. They had him pretend to have a flat tire with his truck, and he came out and said, "Hey, can you help me?" And the Texas Rangers were in the bushes, and they just opened fire, and they had Browning automatic rifles. So, and one of them had a camera. So there's footage of right after the ambush, and here's Bonnie all slumped over, hit with 36 Browning automatic rifle bullets. But even Kevin Costner couldn't tell the truth about what actually happened. He had to make the Texas Ranger give them a chance to surrender, which wasn't done. So it's like one of the first mass shooters was a guy who climbed up the tower at Austin University, and 3 cops and a civilian went up there to kill him. And one of the cops said that after they shot him, he took a shotgun and put a round in his forehead to make sure. He said this in a news interview, and everybody went, can you imagine if a cop said that today?
No, 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 no. The cop will not say that today, even if they do it. I'm not even sure the cop would do it today.
Exactly. They'd render first aid. See, They transition from shooting to rendering first aid, and it's like, okay, if you insist, fine. I won't complain.
I don't know. The more time passes, the more jaded I become with these things.
Oh yeah, I'm a
You know,
curmudgeon.
oh God, I'm beginning to pine for the good old days of the sheriffs in the Wild West. You know, Whitman. Um, sorry, I still have a little bit of a problem. There it goes. God, I hate those. I hate those flus, and I get them all.
What's that?
Yeah. The varieties of flu.
Oh,
I got the swine flu. I got the mushuachu. Now I got the bird flu, the chicken flu, and I, I don't understand this. I get the chicken flu. I didn't fuck the chicken. Why should I get it?
you just said you were worried about YouTube striking our video.
Yes. Oh well.
Now
I
you're talking.
didn't fuck the chicken. This is not an animalistic instinct. I'm not pining for the chicken, like you assholes in Ubuntu. No, sorry. Since let's compound the problem. Uh, it's liberating when you don't give a shit anymore.
Oh yeah, no, it really is.
It's absolutely. There is a guy with a video over there with a banjo singing a song about he having no fucks to give.
Mm.
And it is. I strongly recommend it to you. It's very funny. Um,
Well, I just went on Twitter to look up the reaction to Trump bombing the Houthis, and like, okay, Trump went from the golf course to some classified room. He's still wearing his golf clothes, and he's watching the bombing. They're on the third wave, and the commentary on Twitter is hilarious.
I know.
There was one that showed Trump hitting the golf ball, and then the golf ball went, and then it transitioned into a U.S. military video showing the target blowing up.
Yeah.
But there's no. Okay, I saw a fake video, and it showed dead kids and women, and it's like these are the people Trump is bombing, women and children. It's like, how would you find them? How would you locate the Houthi women and children in the area where all their missiles are? Like
they're sitting on top of the missiles.
Well, if they are, then
It's
sorry.
no problem. They use their women and children as shields. Tough on them.
Well, this is what happened in Somalia during the Black Hawk Down incident. They used women and children as human shields, and the Rangers and the Delta Force decided, look, if this is what they're going to do, then they're going to suffer the consequences. So they just opened fire, and they ended up getting out of that situation.
You don't have a choice.
No.
You don't have a choice. We have the same problem with them assholes.
Mm-hmm.
To this day.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I don't think it should even be a consideration anymore.
Well, I mean, okay, I saw a video, and it was a supporter of Hamas with an Israeli, and the Israeli held up his cell phone, and it was blurred out in the video I saw, but he played Hamas's videos from October 7th. And this person who supported Hamas had never seen these videos before, had never actually heard of them. And by the end of the broadcast, this person was renouncing their support for Hamas. And I just thought, how would you not have heard what happened on October 7th? That was the entire impetus for what's going on in Gaza right now. How did you not know that this had happened? And the mind boggles,
because you didn't want to know.
Exactly.
There is absolutely no excuse. All of these feminazis around the world, who want to defend Jane Carroll and her bullshit about being molested by Trump because she's a woman and we have to believe her. And then when you have dozens and dozens and dozens of young girls raped to death by barbarians, all of a sudden they don't see it. They're blind to that.
Well, it's the same. It's the same with the illegals coming up from the south. As you and I both know, that's the real Trail of Tears, where every
Yes.
female of all ages is raped multiply, going from country
Yes.
to country to country.
Yes, daily,
Hmm.
daily, by all kinds of assailants,
Hmm.
including the Mexican police,
Hmm. Of
army,
course. Yeah.
the cartels, the traveling companions. Everybody gets their piece, and nobody gives a shit because
Oh, I saw on an aircraft, an airliner, believe it or not, it was a Charles Bronson movie. This had to be in the 1970s. And Charles Bronson was going to break out a prisoner in a Mexican jail. And all the wives and daughters and family members coming to visit in the Mexican jail were groped by the guards, who were all laughing and commenting to each other. This is a movie made in the 1970s.
Yeah.
So, or if you actually go back to like the 1960s Clint Eastwood movies, the Federales. The Federales were they were just as bad as whoever Clint Eastwood was going up against in the spaghetti western.
They still are.
Yeah.
They still are. When people say that we need the collaboration of the Mexican government to fight the cartels, fuck me, the police and the army are the cartels, you idiots.
Yeah. No, it's true.
So what the hell are you talking about? There isn't anybody in the Mexican government who's not related to a cartel or another.
Well, that's where the leverage comes in. Trump told the Mexicans, I'm going to destroy your economy completely unless you help us out.
And he's going to have to up the ante periodically and keep the momentum going, because the moment he softens up is the moment that they go back to normal.
It's really funny that you should say that. My brother lives next door to an old Mexican immigrant, and against all the rules and regulations in Las Vegas, he has farm animals, including a cow, and the cow is right outside my brother's window, and the cow bellows all day. And so every now and then, when my brother can't stand it anymore,
in the desert, you have to give it to these guys. They're creative.
well, he has chickens. He has like seven roosters, and contrary to what people think, roosters crow all day and all night. And this guy says he has to eat fertilized eggs because eggs that aren't fertilized taste like dirt.
Oh
Okay.
boy.
Um, but my brother has this. He has these. They're like sound guns. They produce like a high pitched sound, and when he can't take it for the cow anymore, he just holds these over the wall and he fires it at the cow until the owner comes and takes the cow somewhere else on the property where my brother can't hear it. And then a couple days later, he brings the cow back because he has to test. He has to test to see if my brother will shoot the cow again. And my brother took him, he couldn't take him to court because they have to have a mediation first.
Right.
And the mediation was done by a Mexican, and nothing happened. The city is refusing to take any action against this guy who illegally has farm animals within the city limits. And it's that thing where you can't get this guy to abide by the laws, even if you blast his cows with the sound gun, and by extension you blast him. He will do something, but it'll only last for a temporary
Right.
time period. It's amazing. I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to live with a cow right next to my window. And it's huge. It's huge, and it's in a pen where it can't even turn around. It just stands in this pen with about a foot of space on either side and
A
a foot
milk
in
cow.
front. What's that?
He has it for milk, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know. I just don't understand. Why would you bring this horrible quality of life up from your third world hellhole and
Because for
install?
that imbecile, it's not a horrible quality of life.
He's what?
It's life. It's not a horrible quality of life. That is life.
That is life. Yeah.
That is the only life he knows.
Yeah.
How can you not have a cow and
Isn't it
have fresh
weird though?
milk every morning?
Isn't it weird though? We have Africans, we have Afghans, we have Cambodians, we have people coming from very rough parts of the world, and the first thing they do is they figure out how to make money and improve their quality of life. But you won't get that from a certain number of Mexicans who, like you said, they just want to bring they have no desire to improve their quality of life.
You see, Americans labor under the delusion that people come to this country in search of freedom, that they want a part of the American dream, that they see the beacon of light atop a hill beckoning to come to a place where they can enjoy rights most people cannot imagine. Well, I have news for you. They cannot imagine them either. They're not coming here for any affection for American principles or ideas. They're coming here as a purely commercial transaction, as a place where they can make more money or receive more benefits. And they're totally ignorant of the founding principles of this country, and they don't give a rat's ass about it. You take a look at all of these assholes that we've had. We've had. It's a good thing that I cannot be on the streets now. Uh, though next week I will, because now even in Miami, you had a bunch of idiots from the University of Miami. University of Miami is not a public university; it's a private institution. It's expensive as shit. People pay an arm and a leg to go there. There are a shit ton of Jewish students in there. Hey, Miami. And you have all of these assholes in Liberty Square protesting the arrest of this Khalil asshole,
Hmm.
the Algerian born in Syria, who's a student, but he's not a student. The guy is a plant, by the way. He came in on a student visa to be a graduate student. Within 6 months, he was married and going for the permanent resident card. And he lied on every application. And he was an organizer for Hamas. And you have people protesting his arrest in
Did you?
the name of freedom of speech.
Yeah.
These people, these people are insane. They
Well, you have
ought to
right
be
wingers.
locked up in an insane asylum.
You have right wingers saying the same thing, that he should be allowed to say what he wants. But did
Yeah, in Syria.
you see the arrest video?
No, I haven't.
His partner sounded very weak and blubbery, and who the personnel arresting him would not identify themselves. He said, "Get on the phone to Amy. Amy is their lawyer." And she said, Amy wants to know, she wants names. And one of the people frog marching this guy away said, "We don't give out our names." And then Amy tried again. What federal organization is arresting him? We don't give out that information. And Amy, the lawyer, was getting more and more upset, and she wanted to know where he was being taken. And so they
Guantanamo, asshole.
they gave her an address of like a transit point where he'd basically be come in, and then they get his name and all of that, and then they'd sweep him off somewhere else. But
yes,
then finally the woman, the partner, said, Amy wants to talk to you, and they said, we have nothing to say to his lawyer.
Yeah.
It was like what you were telling me about the was it this guy who he was arrested?
Yeah, that was in New York.
That was in New York.
And they took him to a detention center in New Jersey.
New Jersey.
So Amy filed for the habeas corpus and all the judges in New York, and the judge issued an order, but that order is only valid in New York, not in New Jersey. So up yours, buddy. So they finally figured out he was in New Jersey, so they went to do it in New Jersey. But by the time they filed in New Jersey, the guy was already in Louisiana.
Yep.
And at this rate, by the time they finally catch up with him, they're gonna file in Algiers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because that and another one it was already deported. People don't realize two things, and I encourage our viewers to go online. All of this is online, and take a look at the application for permanent residency.
Mm-hmm.
And take a look at the questions on page 2.
Mm-hmm.
Are you or have you ever been a member of an organization that advocates the harm to the government of the United States? Are you or have you ever been? And you have a bunch of questions there. Any which one you answer falsely means that whether you have already been granted citizenship, everything abates, goes back to zero. They snatch the citizenship, imagine the residence, and deport you. They did that several times with Nazis, for instance, where they were not expelled from the US for being a Nazi or liking Hitler. They were expelled for lying on their residence and citizenship applications.
Yeah, there was an Indian national, a woman who was as well known as this guy, the Syrian, and she had her green card, and her student visa, and since she had also lied about it, she deported herself to Canada, before ICE could even get their hands on her. So she's gone.
Yeah.
And Colombia is expelling its Hamas supporters because the Trump administration is going to cut off all funding if they keep allowing this shit.
It's using soft power. The Department of Education has already sent them a letter canceling all of their grants. And half of the faculty in Colombia is up in arms because they're losing millions of dollars in grants. And they said, we'd be willing to review this and see if we can restart some grants, provided that you do this and this and this and this and this and this, and that means adopting a definition of anti-Semitism that mirrors that of the State Department, protect your Jewish students, get out of campus all of these organizations that are closing buildings and occupying classrooms and harassing students. And it goes, it's 2 pages of the things they have to do. And they started doing it because if they don't, half of the faculty are not going to be receiving a fucking dime this year.
Yeah.
And, that is using finances as leverage. Why not? It's perfectly legitimate.
Well, it's perfectly legitimate. And as Marco Rubio said, that nobody has the right to come to this country under a green card and advocate for terrorism against the United States. That isn't.
Period.
You don't have the right to do that. We have the right.
And he's absolutely correct. If he says in the application, I'm coming here to organize students against Jews and the U.S. in defense of Hamas, there is no fucking way that application is approved. Unless, of course, it lands in the desk of a friend of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. If he's found to be doing that after the fact, he can be thrown out. He is not a citizen of the United States. He's not entitled to the rights of a citizen. He is a guest. And he's entitled to many rights, many more rights than any guest has in any other country in the world. Or try to do this kind of shit against the Mexican government as a temporary resident in Mexico. See what happens.
No, it's the whole thing is I mean, I saw a Democrat on CNN saying that the Democrats are harming their own party, and he was shouted down by all the other Democrats on the panel. And, he just kind of shrugged and said, okay, watch it all happen. It's amazing. They're refusing to see reality, and I think it's great. The Democratic Party is, they are okay. I heard Bill Maher again, the giant intellect, saying that Buttigieg is preparing to run for the presidency because he's already moving to the center. Well, you and I know that first they have to go through the primary process. And in order
to move to the center in the primary process, you don't get elected.
Well, that's the thing. The tradition is, and it's based on reality, is in the primary, you get elected by the base, you get chosen by the base, and then once you're in the general, then you move to the center.
Then you have to run to the center as fast as you can.
Exactly. So if these idiots are doing as they appear to be, if Buttigieg and Gavin Newsom are moving to the center for the primary season,
they're going to lose the base.
Exactly. They won't be selected. The Democrats are going to select between Ocasio-Cortez Jasmine Crockett, and Kamala Harris. It's going to be a whole flock of far left women. That's who it's going to be.
Oh, you gotta be shitting me.
Yeah. If Kamala doesn't run for governor of California, then she's going to run for president again. She has a large constituency who want her to run again.
She has to be wary of this guy. Let me show you that your favorite governor here.
There we go.
Look at the hands. I can't. But now with this attitude, it's like he's gonna do some kind of flamenco clapping.
Yeah.
No.
Conditions that determine our fate and future, and that fundamental notion of agency, I think, is important more broadly, and I think that goes to some of the issues around victimization. And I see.
By the way, is he practicing for giving speeches while cuffed?
Well, this is all deliberate because look where the camera is.
Oh yes.
A lot of that, respectively, on the right, increasingly, even with Trump often approaching things from that sort of mindset, conditions that determine our fate and future. And that fundamental notion of agency, I think, is important more broadly. And I think that goes to some of the issues around, victimization. And I see a lot of that, respectively, on the right, increasingly, even with Trump often approaching things from that sort of mindset, condition.
He's also wearing a black shirt so that his hands are more visible. So this is deliberate.
Remember the magic hands?
Well, okay, there's an these Irish performers, they're called hand dancers, and they do what's the name of the song? Let's see. Irish hand dancers. Cleary and Harding. Cleary and Harding are they're a couple who they sit at a table and their hands dance. And they look exactly like Gavin Newsom. Their most famous video, what was it called? They did a song. Let's see. Yeah, so Gavin Newsom's hand movement, he looks like Harding and Cleary and Harding, and it's I think they're trying to give him some kind of I noticed something a long time ago. Democrat politicians, they try for a visual trademark. Remember, there was some old member of Congress. He always wore little half glasses on the end of his nose.
Yes.
Then there was a famous famous defense attorney, and he always had a pair of glasses on his head. And so when he would read a statement, he would take out another pair of glasses to read the statement. So the pair of glasses on his head was purely his visual trademark. There was another leftist defense attorney who always wore a buckskin jacket. And for whatever reason, leftist politicians, they all try for a visual trademark. And maybe Newsom has been told by his Judas goat advisors that he needs to adopt I mean, okay, what was that guy's name who he ran for governor in Texas, and Trump made fun of his hand movements?
Beto.
Yes, yes, Beto,
Beto.
Beto, yeah,
Beto
Beto,
O'Rourke, the Irish Mexican.
yeah.
What? Oh, God. Did Stalin do the hand dance? They're asking us in the chat. No, but Stalin opponents did the dance, the tree dance. Oh, God. Nadler wears his pants pulled up to his chin.
Yeah, Nadler. Okay, Nadler. Nadler has. If you ever watch, if you ever watch the Humphrey Bogart movie, The Maltese Falcon,
Yes.
the villain is played by a British actor named Sidney Greenstreet, and Sidney Greenstreet was rather overweight, and his belt line was right here, and so there's all these
Right,
scenes.
because he has to tighten the pants above the belly.
Exactly, and it's shocking because like he's sitting down and he's got like 2 feet of pants below his belt line, which is up. I mean, you know that in the 1940s, the belt line was much higher
Yes.
than it's worn today.
Not
but-
even when I was a kid. When I was a kid, the waistline was around the navel.
Mhm.
Eh, Then they came with ever shorter waistlines with jeans. I think Levi's started with the low
Correct.
cut, and then all of a sudden everything followed, and it went right below the belly. But
Yeah, for years, women wore what were called low-rise jeans that were very low, and now young women are wearing what used to be called mommy jeans, where they have
yes,
they have the. I mean, they're horrible. They're so
almost to the base of the teeth.
exactly.
Yeah.
And fashionable young women wear those jeans, and they're so ugly. It's incredible.
Well, but the same thing is happening in fashion as it's happening everywhere else. You have people with no taste, no sense of history, and no idea what the fuck they're doing, just trying to come up with something different.
Well, years ago, super baggy clothes were in, and my brother predicted that it was going to go in the opposite direction. And so right now we're sort of in the hideous skinny like skinny suits.
Yeah.
Everybody's wearing like skin tight suits, and
God, I hate them.
well, you have to be skinny yourself. If you have any body fat whatsoever.
When I was skinny and nobody fat, I hated them too.
Oh yeah, no, I hate wearing anything that clenches me. I hate it. I always
Yeah.
have.
No, and the way they look to me like Woody Woodpecker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, it's a Woody Woodpecker suit.
Well, the skinny suits that were popular in the early '60s, you know, like the Beatles wore and everything.
Yep.
You have to be a young guy to wear clothes like that. And here in Los Angeles, there was a house. It was the most expensive house. It had been on the market for like 10 years. And the guy selling it wanted something like 60 million. And it was just this horrible, ugly, expansive. I mean, it looked like a marble airplane hangar. And the guy trying to sell it was this white beard guy wearing a skinny suit, and it didn't work. Like when he turned around from the side, you could see his what are those called? The right here on the sides above the
love handles.
Love handles. You could see his love handles through his suit jacket, and it looked like if he ever tried to sit down, his pants would explode. You know, it was a bad look. But yeah, they eventually somebody bought that house. I think they lowered it from 60 million to like 30 million, and somebody bought it. But it literally looked like an airplane hangar made of marble. It was so ugly, and it had like an outdoor swimming pool that came into the house.
Yep.
So it's like when it gets cold or hot, there's that gap like the air, cold air is going to come in,
No, no, you can use an air curtain, but it is stupid.
I don't know. It was
It's a very
just,
stupid thing to do. Eh, they're just finishing one about 100 yards from where I'm at, and God, this thing is awful. It's awful. It looks like a bread factory made of cement.
Yep.
And you were talking about the gray walls.
Mm-hmm.
Every wall is gray.
Yeah.
God, why would anybody want to live there? I don't know.
Before Joe Rogan went to Austin, he lived somewhere, and after he got his contract with Spotify, he bought this mansion on a hill, and it was made of pure glass, and it was that slightly tinted green glass that's like this thick.
Yeah, laminated glass.
No curtains. It's like, why in the world would you live in a glass house? I mean, I don't know.
I wouldn't. Don't ask me. I wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember a woman, an architect. She designed the house, and it was featured in a shit ton of magazines. And I couldn't understand it. There were things in that house that made it positively impossible to live in. Number one, apparently she didn't like having the servants around, so the kitchen was physically separated from the house. So whenever they had dinner or something, we would have the maids bring in the food from the kitchen through an open patio, which in winter, while it was blowing and snowing, meant that you could never eat anything other than a fucking icicle.
Mm-hmm.
Because by the time the food got to the dining room, it was fucking frozen. So they ended up building some kind of canvas corridor between the kitchen and the house so that the kitchen personnel could get to the house without being blown away in the winter. Then you went to the bedrooms and there were no fucking walls.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, wow. And then at night, they lowered little paper curtains, Japanese style.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm telling you, her daughter gave me a heck of a magic lantern show every night. There was no privacy. And these people didn't realize that when they turned the light in the rooms, we got a ringside seat to the show.
Yeah.
And the feature I liked the least was the downstairs loo was inside a column in the center of the living room. And the walls didn't make it to the ceiling. It was shorter. So let me see if I put this right. Nobody could go to the bathroom without being noticed.
Mm-hmm.
You got up, you headed for the column in the center of the room. Everybody knew you were going to the loo.
Mm-hmm.
Then once you were in the loo, every sound was amplified and released into the wild because the walls did not close. Who would do that?
Well, there used to be a show on cable about the world's most expensive yachts. And there was a couple, and it was some old guy, some silver beard, and his trophy wife. They had this yacht, and the thing about the yacht was that they didn't want to ever see any of the servants or the crew. So the servants and the crew had to move around inside the walls of the yacht. So if they were going to eat at 8 o'clock, the servants would bring the food. They would get in a little elevator that would carry them up to the dining room, and then the elevator would open up inside the wall, and then they would carry the food over and put it on the table through the wall, like a little section of the wall would
Like a
raise,
window.
put the food. The captain of the crew and the captain, the mechanics, everybody, they all existed inside walls. I don't know. I think, don't those ships, they all have radar, right? So when the couple was out on the foredeck taking the sun, somehow they blocked off the view of the bridge, because nobody in the crew was allowed to be seen. And they would clean, for example, everything was scheduled so that the couple would be on the foredeck, and that's when the maids would come out from the walls and clean the rooms and everything. And I just thought, these people had to be Democrats. There was absolutely no way that these people were conservatives. They had to be Democrats, because they were interviewing them and they were talking about they paid for the illusion that they were out there in the boat by themselves. Yeah. And it's like, but you know that there are human beings moving through the walls, and
no, those are the plebs. They don't count.
Apparently. And of course it was a butt ugly yacht. It looked like one of those Russian oligarch yachts, like a motel out on the water with a big prow. But that was like the stupidest thing I'd ever heard of. To make your chefs and your maids and everybody move around inside the walls. I mean, how pathetic do you have to be to you pitch a huge tantrum? If you,
I don't know. We had, when I was growing up, we had a fairly large staff at home, and we all had dinner together. My father wouldn't allow people who worked in the house to eat crouched in the kitchen when we had a large table. And in my house, we didn't have servants; we had employees,
mm-hmm.
and they were to a large extent members of the family. They were living under a roof.
Mm-hmm.
So they did, of course, had chores and things that they had to do. That's why they got paid. But I did too. Everybody had their chores and everybody had the things they needed to do. And then we all sat at a table together. And the people who were most alarmed by this practice were the socialist friends.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else kind of either understood or accepted the eccentricity. But the leftards, how can you do that? How can I do that? The woman who takes care of my child, what, I'm going to send her to pee in a tree and eat on the floor? This is the woman who is taking care of my daughter. So she sat at the table next to my freaking daughter. The leftards never quite understood that. They are more class conscious than anybody else.
Well, the oil camp, where the last oil camp I lived in Venezuela, everybody had a maid, and a gardener handyman. And in our house, my father put an air conditioner in the maid's casita. And so she was the only maid who had her own air conditioner. And
Right.
so all the maids would come over every day, and they would socialize there. They would have coffee and everything. And her job was to basically clean, but she had the run of the place. She and her friends would usually have dinner with each other so they could gossip.
Yep.
But like you said, she's an employee, and it wasn't. I mean, she literally just had the run of the house. She would like come in, and as the kids move from one point to another, she would, dust and vacuum and do all of that. And everybody acknowledged her. And she had a sister, a little sister, and the sister would come over almost every day, and we would just play with the sister. And I have a really good picture, a photo taken in Halloween of my father with a jack-o'-lantern with the sister. And it was just, they were just people who happened to be, the big sister was the employee, and the little sister was just her little sister who would come over and play with us. And it was all very casual. And I couldn't imagine, like, in all these Korean series I watch, the wealthy people sit down to eat, and there's servants just sort of standing in a row, and their job is to bring in the courses, and as soon as somebody's finished, just silently, take out the courses, and you never acknowledge them. Like when you get up to leave the room, they all bow, and you never say their names, you never greet them, you never do anything. They're just there to serve you. And there are plenty of people that, I mean, you go on a lot of cruises, and in these commercials for cruises, I've seen commercials where it's like, it shows staff like feeding people at their tables. It's like you get babied, you get
Yeah. Well, no, nobody's ever attempted that and lived to tell the tale.
well, it's the thing that there are some people who want that. They want to be waited on hand and foot. Well, it's like a massage. I've never gotten a massage in my life. I don't like strangers touching me, and I couldn't imagine somebody. I can't imagine lying naked on a table while some guy oils up his hands and starts massaging me from head to toe. Or even a woman, even a female. I would abhor that sort of contact. But some people like it. They want to be waited on hand and foot. They want to have.
It depends. I had to go through rehab once, and I had a kinesiologist.
Oh yeah.
And of course there is, but I understand what you're saying, because it wasn't particularly pleasant to me.
No.
It has to be the wife.
Well, I hurt my back permanently in 1990 in San Francisco, and I had to go to a physical therapist, and he had to do all of that, and it really bothered me, because I don't like to be touched, and but the company, in order for insurance purposes, I had to go through all this nonsense. Twas bad.
Interesting. Now we've passed the second hour, and I haven't told people, so here we go. All of these thing is free to watch, but not free to produce, and we put a lot of time and effort, and we pay for a lot of crap in order to do this. So please help us if you can to keep both the channel and uh, social quadverum open and running. And you know, Thomas, remember when we had those uh, uh, denial of service attacks at social
Yes.
quadverum,
Hmm.
and we managed to um survive them rather elegantly. Uh,
Hmm.
now they're trying to do it in a more massive scale with X, and sometimes I think they don't even need the attack because they're having problems anyway. Um, but it's like there is no refuge. You have to have these things at all times. You never know where the bad guys are coming from, and all of that costs money. So please help us if you can. Best way, come over here to odyssey.com. You have the link, whether you are in X or in YouTube, you can get to us, and you can click on support or click on the dollar sign in the chat and send a tip, or become a member of this channel. Even better, by clicking on join right under the video. In X, if you don't want to do this, you can subscribe to my timeline. Let me see. Uh, there we are at the Brother Lie. You can subscribe there, send us $5 per month, and that helps defray the cost of all of this thing. And you can also go to quadverum.com/support us and do a one-time or a monthly contribution. Thank you so much for doing it. And just remember, every time you support us, a Democrat shits their pants. Why not? And that's it. So enough of the asking for money. And we're going back to the last half hour. You know, we have an inordinate amount of uh, uh, people watching, but I've noticed something pretty strange.
What?
You usually when what you might call it, when we have the thing in uh, X, I have about 240 while we're going live in the timeline, and you have about 1,200 to 1,500. Now you are in the correct thing, but in my timeline, it's only 15 tonight.
It's only what?
15,
Hmm.
15 viewers. We have a regular amount in Odyssey, a regular amount in YouTube, a regular amount in your timeline, but my timeline is hidden behind the redwood forest.
Well, I have no idea. Like, I have all sorts of fears about um, moles and people getting past any kind of vetting. Not fears that I would talk about publicly.
Mm.
But I mean, I don't even know how many employees Twitter has. Like I don't know. I don't know if the shadow banning is done by AI, if it's done by human beings. I have no idea. I don't know
Both.
how it works. I don't know how it works, and so I wouldn't know in a something that is so enormous. How would they pick out individuals? Are they getting feedback? Dear Twitter, you should block this guy because XYZ. That's how they do it on YouTube. That once once you get a certain number of complaints about your show, your hour or whatever, then it gets demonetized, that sort of thing. But it takes human being, and okay, I guess on Twitter or on YouTube now they use a verbal AI, because you see people using all these weirdo terms like um, they never say the well, I won't say it because we're on YouTube, but when you delete yourself, that's what people say. They, self deletion, that sort of thing. Because there's all these words that you're not allowed to say, because the verbal algorithm will then automatically demonetize you or just whatever. And it's really funny because, okay, I spend most of my time. I'm working on a new book now on Germany after World War One, and so I do a lot of Googling. And Google now has this AI sort of overview in your results. If you Google something, the first thing you get is the Google AI overview. And the Google AI overview, when it comes to what I'm looking for, is 100% wrong every time. And I just read today that Google's AI is all search search engines AIs are generally 60% wrong. That's the number. And there, for when you're 60% wrong, then you're useless. What's the point in having? And in my case, I always, when I Google something, I always ignore the AI overview because it's all wrong. And this isn't to say that AI will always be wrong. It'll always be improving, but AI is only as good as the people who made it.
Well, according to AI, I'm the author of several books I never wrote.
Yeah, exactly.
And I read it. I do it every now and then just for shits and giggles. But I do. Who is me?
Mm-hmm.
And I get my bio, and some things it's like, wow, amazing. Of course, it's all information that's got to be online somewhere or another. Eh, but then I get, my bibliography, and I got something like 16 published books, and I get 12, and of the 12, six are not mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot even imagine. And sometimes, with a nice synopsis of what the book is about and what my opinion is on this or that, it's all bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. It's interesting. There are some tantalizing hints, but this is not ready for prime time.
No, and okay, the Israelis use AI to target terrorists. Doge is using AI to flip through, government finances. That's working. I've read that medical AI can solve issues that would have taken human beings years to work out. It can solve it in a
Well,
matter of.
let me put it this way: if you have to go through 7,000 social security numbers
Mm-hmm.
uh, associated with a death index, if you have to do it in person, it will take you several days.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it with an AI algorithm, you can do it in a handful of minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and you get the perfect results. And for this, the margin of error is actually very small
Mm-hmm.
because it is very focused, very specific, tailored to a particular database. Uh, the same thing for the Internet of Things. If you're doing automation, if you're writing code, you can have AI check your code for errors, and it's going to do in an hour the work of a week.
Mm-hmm.
So for many things, it's already a very valuable tool. But I think people have greater expectations than what reality can provide
Mm,
when it comes to AI now. No, it's not going to design an airplane. And if somebody designs an airplane with AI, I ain't going in.
mm.
Mhm. No, it cannot write a thesis, although it can, get some shit out of the internet and make it look interesting for a while. But it's not ready.
Well, this is this is the thing that there have been several movies made of scripts written by AI, and they're horrible.
Yeah.
They simply, I mean, there are people claiming that all of this is going to it's going to okay. Somebody
And it's got to be plagiarized. It's got to be a hodgepodge of shit somebody else already wrote.
well, exactly, and they're talking about using AI to make movies, and not having to hire actors and everything. That's not going to work because the majority of the success of a movie is the actors going out and being seen in public, and doing interviews, and going to red carpet functions and all of that. People love movie stars. Nobody is going to fall in love with an AI actor. Um, the
Yeah, the psycho who falls in love with the anime character, maybe, but that's a small minority, isn't it?
It's a small minority, and it has really nothing to do. Okay, I watched a movie that's making a lot of waves called Companion, and it's about a guy with a very devoted girlfriend, and essentially the plot of the movie is that she finds out that she's an android, and that she was created for his sexual pleasure, and he's reprogrammed her to do something that is going to make him a lot of money, and then his plan was to program her back to the factory settings. But during this whole thing, she gets a hold of his cell phone, and she starts programming herself. She puts her intelligence up to 100%, and all sorts of things. And it's an okay movie, but what makes it interesting is that they chose an actress who's about the least android looking person you've ever seen in your life. And I just don't see that happening in the future. I don't see companies, like, for example, this actress, she's not conventionally beautiful. Like her two front teeth, she has sort of prominent front teeth, and instead of being perfectly flat, they sort of turn inward slightly, just very slightly. It all works. Everything works on her face. She's running around in a bathing suit, and she appears to have rather short legs, but everything works. She's a human, because she's not perfect. She's not, and I
Right.
just don't see, if we ever come to the point.
But for an android, you expect somebody following a pattern of beauty.
Well, this is the thing that
More like a Vogue cover.
I don't see. If a man were to decide that he wants an android that is 100% devoted to him, and she there's little hints throughout the movie where she's like lying in bed with him, praising him, and he says, "Go to sleep, Iris," and she automatically goes to sleep. And I think if a man wanted a woman who was simply there for his pleasure, he would not want anything except uh, uh, a conventionally beautiful woman with no faults at all, like
Mm.
you know, um,
Yeah, get your money's worth.
Yeah, she would be leggy, she would be busty, she would have a perfectly symmetrical face, all that sort of thing. And
Or look like Leah Thomas.
well, the thing is that we are a very, very long way away from having science fiction androids who we
Yeah.
can't tell the difference. And
Very, very low. There are some companies that have managed to produce something that looks like it, but it isn't. It's more of an advertising gimmick. But no, we're way, way away from it yet.
also, it would be impossible to create an android that didn't need regular maintenance. For example, unless you create a cyborg that has actual human skin over this endoskeleton, whatever you create as skin is going to need to be replaced periodically.
Yep.
And
Well, yours is replaced periodically.
right, it they would have to create
We're constantly leaving a trail of dust
exactly
as we shed our skin.
as we shed our skin. And if we were to create androids that were indistinguishable from human beings, you would have to create the equivalent of a digestive system, because assuming you're going to want to eat dinner with this thing, and obviously you're not going to want it to chew food up and put it into like a colostomy bag in its center. You're going to have to figure out how it can process the food and eliminate it. Um, okay, in this movie, it showed the android showering. Um, if the android is covered with some form of rubber or plastic and doesn't know that it's an android, in this movie, the android could feel pain through its skin and things like that. But there's just, I mean, we're so far away from it. You do see every now and then you see some Asian robot that has artificial intelligence, but it don't look anywhere near human.
No.
The ones,
And it has a level of conversation comparable to your average Democrat. It's not going to last through the end of dinner.
well, and the robots that can walk are the weirdest looking things you've ever seen. Um, Nobody's built anything that can stride like a bipedal human. They all have bent legs, and they sort of sit like this, and they look like spacemen. And you know,
It's like they're about to take a shit at any moment.
yeah. There was a movie made a few years ago called Ex Machina about a mad scientist who was building female androids, and he had some genius kid come to his cabin in the mountains to meet his creation. And the plot of the story was that he fell in love with the android, but I mean, she didn't have a body. She was a robot. She had a humanoid face, and I can't remember. I think eventually she like put on a dress and a wig so she looked more human to him. But it
It's
would
like
be
an Asimov series I Robert, where Daniel has such an appearance, but over time he finds ways to improve his look and look more human
mhm.
in the process of becoming human. Asimov was full of these paradoxes, but that's fine, you know, for a 40-year-old sci-fi novel. Uh, but um, in today's um, world, we're no closer to a Daniil than Asimov was in the 70s.
Well, that's the thing, that physically we can't create a convincing humanoid, a convincing android rather, and intellectually we surely can't.
No, but we can make a convincing Democrat.
Well, it's the sort of android movies I've seen. You know, they're the sort of goal seems to be to create like the perfect. Well, we're back to that movie I told you about, Poor Things. The goal is to create like the perfect female companion who will, you know, be there to satisfy all your pleasures.
A whore with a 4-year. I was gonna say a whore with a 4-year-old brain.
Yeah,
God, these
and
people are sick. You know that would be the exact opposite of what I would want in a companion.
well, yeah. I mean, I've never dated a woman whose IQ was lower than mine. In fact, at least one of
No.
them had an IQ that was like massively superior to mine. So, there's a movement right now that I can only describe as being anti-woman, and it's there's a term for the men who subscribe to this. They are extremely hostile to women, and they want to sleep with women, and they want a wife, but the wife is to be completely under control of the man. Like, okay, one of the things that really gets these men, like, have you heard of a guy named Andrew Tate?
Oh God. For the first time in my life, I listened to 5 minutes of this asshole last week.
Mm-hmm.
I want my 5 minutes back.
Well, this is the thing,
He's an imbecile. He's a complete and utter idiot.
he is, and he's advocating a life that I couldn't possibly live myself. But one of the things that really upsets this type of man is if a woman wants a girl's night out with her friends, because they say the only reason your partner wants to do that is because she wants to cheat on you. And there seems to be a complete lack of trust. Like every woman I was ever involved with, at some point, she would have a girls' night out with her friends, and I knew that she wasn't going to cheat on me.
How about a week at the beach with their friends?
Well, exactly. I mean, women need time together with women. They don't.
Yes. And I need time at the club with other males.
Well, this is the thing, that these men enjoy the company of men, but they don't want their women to enjoy the company of women, because obviously the only reason women get together is to cheat on their men. And
Well, I mean, I can imagine if this imbecile ever got a woman to acquiesce to a relationship with him, within 2 months, she'll be looking for finding all the wrong places, because how could a woman be in any way satisfied with this piece of shit for a companion?
well,
Maybe at some level he knows that.
one of the women I dated, the woman I dated for the longest time, was very physically attractive. And I went to a bar with her once in Tokyo. It was a club, rather. And the second we walked in, it was in Tokyo, this crowd of 4 American men approached us, and one of them asked my girlfriend if she wanted to dance, and she said yeah. And the other 3 took me to the bar and started buying me drinks. And they rotated around. All four of them were dancing with her. And they plied me with drinks. And there was this very morose American man sitting next to me. And at some point he said, "Do you know who those guys are?" And I said, "No." He said, "They're from my ship. I'm the radio operator. They're Navy SEALs." I went, "Okay." He said, "They're going to steal your girl." And I said, "What? What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, they've monopolized her the whole night. They're going to steal your girl." And I said, "Well, look, if she wants to go home with 4 Navy SEALs, then she will, and that'll be the end of our relationship. But I'm not going to prohibit her from dancing. For one thing, all 4 of those guys were much better dancers than I was, and she was a trained dancer. So I always felt like an idiot when I danced with her. So for once, she got to dance with 4 different guys who were all good dancers. There was nothing wrong with this. They had come in from a boat. They landed in a country where the women are all really weird and really culturally, Japanese women tend to be rather immature. And they got to dance with a really good dancer who was an American. And they got to dance in every style they wanted to dance. And she could keep up with them. They didn't drink. She didn't drink that much. They barely drank. They were able to handle their beer. I got my drinks bought for me all night. And then at the end of the night, all 4 of them hugged her goodbye and shook my hand. And that was the end of it. I had no problem at all with it because it was weird and it was interesting and it was fun. And I got a full night of free drinks. What was the problem?
A certain degree of possessiveness is the mark of a lesser intellect. Nobody can steal a woman from me because I am not the owner of any woman.
Well, that's the thing. If she came up to me and said,
"She stays with me or doesn't."
Exactly. If she'd said, "I want to go home and have a fling with these 4 Navy SEALs," yeah, I'd say, "Okay, I'll move out tomorrow.
We're gonna have a five-some over there."
Yeah.
So number one, I cannot understand either men or women who are that possessive. I think they have no relationship.
Well, exactly.
They wouldn't know what it is. In the case of this Andrew Tate, he sounded to me like a 4-year-old.
Well, he sounded like he was motivated.
He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
Well, he also sounded like he's motivated by hatred, by hostility.
Oh, but hatred and hostility towards all. He had some disparaging comments for Asians, South Americans, Eastern Europeans. And I'm thinking, is this idiot listening to himself?
No, I mean,
because he is the very shit he is describing.
Well, I don't
know.
I'd heard of him. I saw a picture of him. He was sitting in a jet. He had those awful sunglasses that are dark at the top and light colored down below that like Iranian pimps wear. And his shirt was unbuttoned down to his belly, and he had a gold chain. He had gold rings, and he was smoking a cigar. And I just thought, oh, for God's sake, this is like the villain in every cheesy, thriller I've seen on TV. And well, I just got the impression that this is somebody who would never agree to be with a woman who, like I told you, those Navy SEALs were much better dancers than I was. And so this was an opportunity for my trained dancer girlfriend to, for once in our
To
relationship
move the skeleton.
what's that?
Yeah.
Just
To move the skeleton.
exactly, to enjoy, to be with people on her level. I
Yeah.
don't imagine Andrew Tate has ever, agreed to let any woman he's been with, if he's been with a woman even, to have that sort of opportunity when she's involved with him. But I think he landed in Florida, and he was immediately charged there with some other, human trafficking type issue. So he's very upset. He thought he'd be welcomed with open arms, and it's like, well, but you're apparently doing a lot of
The
really
guy is trash. I haven't been the same category with the Tommy Robinsons of this world. The guy's nothing but trash. And I do not understand why people may want to hear whatever the fuck he has to say. I just don't.
no.
Anyway, we've gone past our bedtime again, so
Holy smokes.
let's wrap it up. Yeah,
Okay.
let's wrap it up. It was fun. I was ready to come up with something else, but then I checked the time. Uh, Anything that we should have discussed and we didn't, my friend?
I don't think so. I think we sort of covered the general basics of it, and there's always next Saturday.
There's always next Saturday, and we're going to keep an eye on Ukraine, Russia, because I think that's where the biggest lesson in leverage we're going to see. And we're going to see several types of leverage brought to bear, uh, not only with Russia and Ukraine, but also with Europe and NATO countries. I think everybody's going to get a little bit of soft power, a little bit of economic suasion. We're going to see a lot of economic suasion in Mexico and Canada. There's one thing that I want to say before I leave. I'm sick and tired of people talking about tariffs and giving us all sorts of wrong ideas. Uh, Tariffs are inflationary, don't you know? Because the price translates directly, the tariff translates directly into the price of the consumer goods, and the consumer pays more. Funny that the same assholes who say this haven't figured out that's what happens with corporate taxes yet, have they?
Well,
Did you notice
I
that?
mean, all these idiots who oppose what's going on, a hell of a lot of them are investors, and they've caused the stock market to take a shit. And so, my own investments are down, and it infuriates.
Don't worry about it.
No, I mean, I know it's going to
Yeah.
go up again, but I hate this roller
Yeah,
coaster by morons who can't figure out anything.
well, it's more than morons. It's sons of bitches. And an important thing for people: if you had a 10% tariff on all goods of whatever nature, and a 10% tax on goods produced in the country, then you would have inflation. But the selective application of retaliatory tariffs doesn't affect the universe of goods. It affects aluminum from this place, but not from that one. It affects steel from that place, but not from this one. It affects cars coming in from China or Mexico or Canada, but not from other places. At the same time, when you realize, for instance, that the European Union has tariffs on American made cars, and so does China, what you're doing is leveling the playing field so that our own manufacturers enjoy the same conditions as theirs. When Airbus is heavily subsidized, You either subsidize Airbus, uh, Boeing, or you put a tariff on Airbus to compensate the subsidies they are receiving. Otherwise, Airbus is going to steal your lunch and is going to sell more planes to American Airlines, which are the largest chunk of the world market. Simple as that. There's nothing wrong with this. It's always been used in an appropriate fashion, and what Trump is proposing is very appropriate and very measured. And no, it's not inflationary per se, and it's not going to cause a major war. Eh, why not? Because in order to have a trade war, you have to have two similar forces competing. Canada, who got away with 275% on dairy products from Wisconsin. Remember that, Thomas?
Yep.
When Canada applied 240% tariffs on dairy products from Wisconsin because Wisconsin, being more efficient, was apparently impeding the development of some dairy farms in Canada. Well, you know what? You want to do that? I'll put 240% of your shit. How long before Canadians grab their ankles?
Mm-hmm.
A week? 2 weeks, maybe? How long before Mexicans say, okay, where do I have to sign? This is not going to lead to trade wars. This is going to be to freer trade. And it's about time people realize that. And thank you, Michael, for the Pelagra Fund contribution. But anyway, I wanted to mention that because I think it's going to be an important feature in the next 2 weeks that we have to keep an eye on. I'm not worried about the stock market. The stock market ultimately will respond to profit and loss statements, not to all of this shit modifies the day to day. But show me quarterly results, and I'll tell you where we went. So, anything else? Hello?
No.
In that case, my friend, for everybody else, we are doing the quad meet tomorrow and the VIP room on Tuesday. I'm back, as you can see. So let's restart this car and start driving it again. And with that, I'll see you guys tomorrow. And Thomas, I'll see you tomorrow or next week, whenever you want. And do you have a last word for us?
Prepotency.
Prepotency. Perfect. Thank you so much. I will not be prepotent and I will not impose my will on you anymore. Live long and prosper, my friend.